Hey everybody, we are live and I hope you can hear us and I hope everything is going well. We are, can you guys hear me? Everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, good, we're doing well. We are live and we are doing a show about WandaVision, all things WandaVision, and thank you for joining us. Today we have with us a whole bunch of amazing people. So hold on, I'm going to bring them right on and there we go. We have with us, in no particular order, we have Steve Van Patten, we have Steve Van Patten, we have Adam Freeman, we have Alma, we have Arie Kaplan, and of course we have Fred Melamed, and I am David Levin. We are here to talk about all things WandaVision. So welcome. Warning to begin with, spoilers are going to come up. So if you haven't seen WandaVision yet, go see it and then come back here and watch us on delay. But in the meantime, if you're watching on YouTube, we will be taking your questions and we are going to be having some fun here. So first, I know that I asked you each to tell me who you are and to give me an introduction, but I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. I'm going to start in the upper left-hand corner of my screen, Mr. Steve Van Patten. Say hello and introduce yourself to the folks at home.
Hello, folks at home. I am Stephen Van Patten. I'm a horror writer, publisher, stage manager, raconteur, so to speak. From Brooklyn, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. And now we're going to move on to, let's go to Ray Alma. We'll go down to Ray Alma.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. Ray Alma. Was a cartoonist for Mad Magazine while Mad Magazine was producing original content from the 90s up until fairly recently. An alum of the School of Visual Arts, where I was a cartooning major, and I got to study under Will Eisner and Harvey Kurtzman, and just a huge Marvel comic books fan my whole life, and it's translated into a lifelong fandom and collection of toys and other knickknacks. So happy to be here.
Okay, next we are going to go to Adam Freeman, upper right-hand corner. Adam, say hello.
Hello, I'm Adam Freeman. I'm the president of creative for a television production company, Think Factory Media. Comic book fan, comic book writer, stand-up comedian, and big geek. Thanks for having me.
Next, we're going to go to the lower left-hand corner middle. I'm sorry. We're going to go to the middle to my friend Arie Kaplan. Say hello.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ari Kaplan, and I am a screenwriter for television and video games and transmedia. I'm also a comic book writer, graphic novelist, and an author of books as well as comics. And lately I've been writing a lot of children's books, and specifically a lot of Marvel-themed children's books, like the Loki Little Golden Book and the Doctor Strange Little Golden Book. And Ray and I used to work together occasionally in Mad, because I used to write for Mad as well. So know him from Mad. Hey there.
Very nice. And next we are going to go to my pal in the lower portion of the screen, to Danny Fingeroth. Danny, introduce yourself. Say hello.
Hi, I'm in the top of my screen. I don't know what's wrong with your screen, but hi, I'm Danny Fingeroth. You may remember me from such shows as Danny Fingeroth edits and writes at Marvel Comics for 700 years. The group editor of Spider-Man, the writer of Dark Hawk. There's a new Dark Hawk story coming in April. I wrote a book about Stan Lee, A Marvelous Life. Wait a minute. Here's some other book out there. Masquerading is the first not official, it's just not authorized, and you better believe it. There's another book out there, Masquerading is the first biography of Stan after his death. Bullshit! This is the first one, and of course, it's the best one. And I'll wrestle any one of you who says no. I'm doing a lot of stuff on the comicsplex.com website, which we're doing an all-star 100th birthday tribute to Mr. Al, legendary Mad Magazine guy Jaffe. Al's turning 100 on the 13th. Arie Kaplan will be with us. Sergio Aragones, Peter Cooper, you name them, they're there. And I'm teaching on comicsplex.com at the end of April, beginning of May, a comics editing workshop. The secrets will be revealed, and I might even take off my toupee. Anyway, thank you for inviting me, and I'm sorry I'm a little bit late, guys.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for coming.
That was easy.
And finally, last but not least, my good friend, Fred Melamed, who actually has the inside scoop on all things, on his part. Anyway, WandaVision. So, Fred, say hello.
It's a lot of pressure.
Hi, everybody. I'm Fred Melamed. I'm an actor and a writer from New York, old friend of David Levin's, Marvel Comics fan from way back, and now part of the MCU, as well as some other universes. Delighted to be here and see everybody.
We are so happy to have you, Fred. It is wonderful to have you here with us today. And obviously, we're here to talk about WandaVision, because if we wanted to talk about all the things that we have to talk about Marvel, we could probably be here for years. So for the time being, we're going to get started. And I'm wondering who wants to go first. This was very much a departure for Marvel Comics, WandaVision. They have done TV before, but they've sort of jumped in with both feet this time, because this time it's sort of really part of the universe, as opposed to sort of a corner of the universe like it was on Netflix. What did we think Now, and by the way, remember, if you're watching, there are spoilers tonight. What did we think of WandaVision overall? Who wants to speak up first? Don't all jump in at once.
All right, I'll start. I enjoyed it. I struggled with having to defend it because it was obviously like kind of this experimental, nostalgic kind of thing, and the people around me were like, okay, so what the hell's going on? It's like, well, why don't you just keep watching and find out? It's a Marvel thing. We've kind of seen that Marvel knows what they're doing. So, you know, I just, you know, you just had to kind of like tell people, be patient. It'll sort itself out. And right now, this is kind of funny with the whole like throwback to the Dick Van Dyke Show and all this other good stuff. So, you know, that was my initial thing, and it was just kind of like that. And then when it started to explain itself, then I was able to tell everybody, see, now shut up. So there you go.
Well, Fred, you were on the very first episode, which is as much like the Dick Van Dyke Show as it could get. And this was your introduction to the Marvel universe. What was that like for you to sort of get in there and to be? How did you get to be part of this?
Well, I got to be part of it. I was just called up on the phone by Matt Shakman and Jack Schaefer. Matt Shakman was the director of all episodes, and Jack Schaefer was the writer, showrunner, sort of producer, mastermind of all these episodes. And they just called me up. It was just offered to me. And they pitched it to me with some difficulty. It was difficult to explain the idea. And the way they explained it, and obviously this is a major spoiler for those who haven't seen it, but the way they explained it was that Wanda Maximoff grew up in this country behind the Iron Curtain, this fictional country. And when she was young, she dreamt of the West, but her only real exposure to the West was through these pirated VHS tapes that she and her friend, now some of this didn't occur in this, you didn't get to find out about all of this in the series. This is the way it was explained to me. So she and her friends behind the Iron Curtain would pass around these superannuated old tapes of American television shows. And that was kind of what they got to know in their formative years about the West. So, as it was explained to me, when Vision dies and her dreams are shattered in the film, one thing I should explain to those who, well, I think everybody now understands this, but this was a rather bold idea on Kevin Feige's part. One of the changes that he made was he decided to make the world of the television shows and the world of the feature films continuous. That is, the same actors, the same storylines. That I don't think was, you know, there were Marvel products, but they were discrete, separate worlds. So he had this idea that they could be woven all together. So in the last movie, we find out that WandaVision's plans to lead a kind of normal life outside the superhero world are dashed. And Wanda has to kind of deal with that. So the question was that I asked initially was, well, is this going on in Wanda's mind? This whole thing, is this her fantasy of, you know, because she can't stand having lost vision? And the answer was, well, her superpower is that she has her mind has the capacity to actually create realities. But those realities come in conflict with the lives of the people who are affected by the realities. For example, my character, as it was explained to me, is this guy that is Vision's boss at this job that he mysteriously has. And yet, there comes a time early on in the first episode and now we know only episode that I appear in, where a crack in this world is very evident. So it's not a figment of her imagination, it's real, but problems develop in the application of her fantasies towards this actual real town that really exists. So as an actor, you're always kind of trying to figure out, well, what is real for me? Do I believe that this is the real world? Or am I doing this sort of against my will? It seems as though I'm a willing participant in it. And what they said was, you are a willing participant, and she has some degree of control over you, but not complete control. And there are times when your own life and your own needs come in conflict with what she has imagined or what she has projected. And that obviously becomes very evident also with Catherine Hahn's character, also the Agatha character. Anyway, so it's presented to me this way, and I was originally told I was going to be in a certain number of episodes, and a guarantee was made of that, a certain amount of money, which is how you do it when you're an actor. But that actually changed because they were still writing the episodes when I got to Atlanta to do it. So I wound up doing fewer episodes than I was originally, although I got paid for all of them. I thought I was going to have, there were some very great scenes that I had that unfortunately I never got to do. One where I was very concerned about my daughter's welfare, who lives in another town, but that was all. I think they thought it became too much of a side plot, and they didn't want to do it. Anyway, so the answer to this long-winded answer is, it was just presented to me as an opportunity to be a part of this unbelievable, huge behemoth, this MCU thing, and was I interested? And I will say, as an experience, it was a very interesting experience. Just prior to doing this, I had been in New York. I live in California, but I had been in New York doing a micro-budget little indie movie, little indie comedy, where on the craft service table, there was like a thing of Triscuits and a half a thing of peanut butter, and that was it. And to suddenly go from that to the world of Marvel, which is shot at Pinewood, which is a big, huge complex in near Atlanta, where everybody's suits are handmade in Italy, and there's crab, and the sets are bigger than your house, and it's the scope, the size at which everybody works, was very made a fascinating contrast to what I had just done prior to that. But it was just given to me. There was no audition. It was just I was just offered it and thought it would be a great, interesting thing to do.
Wow, that's amazing. Now you guys shot yours in front of a live studio audience. Is that correct?
That is correct. We rehearsed it without the audience. And was done as live shows were actually done, or taped or filmed. I guess prior to tape, filmed shows were done, done in sequence with some stopping. But it was nervous making to actually do it in front of a live audience. It was for me anyway, although I've been a theater actor for many years. It's kind of different because usually when you're rehearsing something, you have some idea of how the audience is going to respond. But with this, it was such a kind of a curveball, such a strange thing. And we know that the Marvel faithful expect certain kinds of storylines, certain kinds of effects, certain size of operations. So to kind of throw this curveball, we really didn't know, especially to the Marvel faithful, what they were going to make of it.
Was it shot before the COVID or?
Yes, it was all shot. Fortunately for me, it was all shot. My stuff was all shot in September and October of a year ago, last September and October. However, they continued shooting and they stopped in March. And then I was supposed to be in the last episode, the very last episode. But unfortunately, COVID was going on then. And because I am at significant risk for COVID complications, I had to say, I'm sorry, I can't come back. There was a scene with me and my wife, supposed to be in the last episode, but it got scrapped because it was too dangerous for me to go.
The entire episode was pretty full of people and stuff and things going on. In any event, Fred, thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else have any questions for Fred on this aspect of it, on his participation?
I'm curious, when you were doing the stuff in front of a live studio audience, were you at all concerned or insecure that the people in that studio audience wouldn't get the references, and that, the pacing and the writing and the directing and the acting of those scenes that you were in were very much of that time period, both kind of like an homage and a parody of that time period? When you're doing it live, it's like doing stand-up comedy. It's like you're saying the punchline and then that matzo ball is out there and it's like, are they going to laugh or not? And I'm just curious whether you're not doing it. You're not doing something contemporary like The Office or Parks and Recreation. You're doing something of a certain time period. Was there a concern from the cast that you were just going to be left standing there because the studio audience didn't get it?
I think our concern was more with the home audience, because the live audience was made up of people of mixed ages. Many people were not, many people middle-aged and older, and some young people too. But even for people that are old enough to remember those shows, I mean, I'm old enough to remember them. I'm almost 65, and I was a kid when those shows were on. So it's not that I saw them in reruns, perhaps as a lot of people who are adults now did. But there's a huge cohort of the audience that has never seen them. And those were the people I think we were more concerned about. But the other side of the coin is to do something that's, especially for people who've been kind of working that salt mine for so long. Paul Bettany, who I got to be friendly with, and Lizzie Olsen, both of whom are, really good, fine actors. To do something that was that different was a great pleasure for them. And especially for Paul, who I think doesn't get to sharpen his comedy chops that often, and in my estimate, is really funny. Can be really funny. So it was a great pleasure for them to do something that was so out of the mold of what they ordinarily are doing in Marvel films. I think we worried more about how the home audience would react to it.
Gotcha.
That's a very good point. Each of us, sort of in our own way, we're all sort of pop culture geeks, and I do include you in that aspect of it, Fred. I think we all have a love of Marvel comics. We all have a love of those old TV sitcoms. I worked for TV Land for quite some time, and I worked for DC Comics as well. Never got to work for Marvel. I have to talk to Danny about that after the show. But why don't we go through, let's talk about both as fans of TV and fans of Marvel. And I'd like to start with Ray, because we haven't spent too much time with him yet. Let's talk, Ray, would you talk about a little bit what your expectations were going into this, and where they met? How did you feel about it? What was going on in your mind as you were watching the show, and what were you hoping for? You're muted.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah, I didn't have any huge expectations going in. I had read some Wanda and Vision miniseries comics and the Vision kind of miniseries. So I kind of figured they were going to go in directions like that, but I kind of left it all at the door when I went into it. So I didn't really have any expectations based on the trailers. I kind of knew what we were in for, and it kind of delivered what I expected. It was entertaining. I was not one of the people that was angry at the slowness of the first 3 episodes, but after by the 3rd episode, I was kind of like,
and Vision has to reveal his powers to save him.
Whoops. What is that?
Let the hearts just leave as if nothing happened.
Oops.
Also, I find it suspect that Arthur...
Sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's all right. So I was getting anxious by the 3rd episode to let's get on with it. But I did enjoy where those 3 episodes took me. So for me, it was okay, this is kind of cool. And then those middle episodes, I was just I was over the hill. I was like, this is fantastic. This is everything I really wanted, and it's delivering on everything, except for not having Fred back. I think was a huge mistake. Kept looking for that. And then I enjoyed the ending. Just a little disappointment in a couple of areas, for instance, Kat Dennings was so enjoyable, and then she was hardly in that last episode, and I really kind of wanted her presence in that last episode to speak for the audience reaction to things that were going on and the revelations. We didn't really get that. So I kind of liked the misdirection of the Evan Peters thing, even though it kind of pissed me off, where I was like, wait a minute, so he's not from the other universe? Okay. a little disappointed, but then like Kat Dennings' character maybe commenting on that would have been really good. So, but overall, I think it was fantastic.
Steve, I know you're going to have to hop off because you're going on to something else in a minute. But why don't you tell us what your thoughts were?
Well, thanks. And yeah, I have to I have to get to my own podcast, Beef, Wine, and Shenanigans. But before I do that, I do want to say, yeah, I know. It was nice to see the Scarlet Witch flushed out as a character. She was kind of introduced. I mean, as we all know, she was introduced in Civil War as kind of like a plug-in and all that. And I don't really like I said earlier, I'm more the horror comics guy, but I don't remember necessarily outside of her assisting Doctor Strange with, fighting Dracula and a couple of things like that. I don't remember her in the books as I don't even think she was in Secret Wars, So it was nice to see her get flushed out. It's also nice to see Monica Rambeau's origin story sort of to see that flushed out, because like with a lot of Marvel superheroes, I want to say their origin story is either they're born with it or it's an accident. And as a little kid, you're reading these books and you're trying to have that accident so that you can be, like I think I gave up in 1992, but I think,
Never give up. Never give up.
no, but I tried, but like the spiders.
And how many spiders died? Yeah,
exactly. They all looked all janky, and the one that did bite me, as to Adam's point, did die.
How much gamma radiation did you expose yourself to?
Well, I have to admit, it was just a microwave.
And if you got powers, would you admit it?
of course you
Oh
would.
hell yeah! Oh hell
you
yeah!
would-
I would have been
you would-
crawling all through Brooklyn Tech, like, okay, look at me.
Yeah, you wouldn't adopt a masked identity.
Nah, what? What's the point of that?
There you
I would just be Spider Steve. That's all. But and it was nice to see her origin story flushed out. I'm looking forward to whatever the hell they've got planned for her, because obviously now that the Skrulls are having a conversation with her, I want to say that's going to lead to the usual thing: action figures, Happy Meals, and all that. So looking forward to that. That's basically my take on the whole thing.
Well, thank you. Danny, I know your time is limited as well. Do you want to weigh in as someone who's been on the inside?
You know, on Earth or in the show? Have you been talking to my doctor?
Well, in terms of WandaVision,
Well, actually, no. Time is actually very relevant. I think that they, the first, half dozen, maybe or 5 episodes or so, were a half hour long. So you could go with it. You could say, well, I'm not sure what's going on here, but it's only a half hour. It's not like some of those other Netflix shows where they kind of, or the Marvel shows where they padded them out, and you just felt like you wanted to claw your eyes out with a ball peen hammer. These were. This was like, okay, this is cool. It's funny. Every couple of minutes or every minute there was some anomalous thing that they would say or do to give you more and more of a hint that there's some bigger thing going on behind the scenes. But really, it was very, it was like, okay, I'm risking a half hour. That was fun. That was enough fun and enough cool stuff. I'll come back next week, and I'll come back next. It was really pretty brilliant, and that the leads that everybody in it was so well cast, and
including Fred, I should say.
Especially Fred. I'm waiting for Fred to have his own show.
I have to say this, and Fred, all due respect. I kind of thought in the very first episode, and those of you who are Marvel fans, and I don't have a picture of him, but those of you who are Marvel fans will be familiar with Dr. Faustus. I think you looked a lot like Dr. Faustus in that first episode, Fred, and to your credit,
I don't know that character. I have to confess, I'm not familiar with him. I know him in Elizabethan literature, but not in the Marvel world.
Well, I mean, in the sense that Fred does look like 10 different therapists I've had over the years. So the only one who looks more like a therapist in comics is Al Jaffee, who's
turning 100 years old. Yes,
Al kind of is a cross between a reform rabbi and a Freudian therapist. So when he says like his snappy answers, it's even funnier. You know, it's like, you know, well, that's almost people like us. You know, bring almost too much to the table since we have 70 years of Marvel continuity. You know, crammed into our heads, so we kind of know the 11 different possibilities of every single scene, whereas maybe
you know,
fresh.
To speak to that, Danny, like, you know, every week after every episode ended, like, fans would be speculating on forums and stuff. Like, at some point, every character was Mephisto. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like everybody was expecting Mephisto to show up, and they're like, oh, that's going to be Mephisto. That's going to be Mephisto.
The rabbit's Mephisto.
Yes, yeah. Everybody was going to be Mephisto at some point.
Fly is Mephisto. The cicada or fly or whatever it is at one point was. I'm not even making that up. That like people are saying that.
It's funny because well, we actually got a question from Oren Levy who wants to know: would you say from YouTube, would you say being a comic book fan enhanced your ability to enjoy the show, or were you distracted by departures from the source material? What do you think?
Yes.
Yes.
both things, you know.
I mean, for me, you know, one of the things, look, we're lucky enough, all of us, to make a living in a, you know, in a field, in an area that we all enjoy and we're all passionate about. So one of the things from when I first started working in entertainment and TV that I've always tried to maintain is the fan aspect, you know, and be able to watch something as a fan and not over analyze it and not compare it to the second act of Battleship Potemkin and why is, you know, and so because we all know those people that, you know, sit at the end of the bar and will just talk themselves out of a fun time. So for me, one of the things that I'm proud of it myself is I can, having all that institutional knowledge, I can still just sit back and enjoy it and let them change and retcon and not overthink it too much and not look for who Mephisto is going to be. So for me, it was the best of both worlds because my passion for the source material is what brought me to it, but it didn't ruin the experience of watching for me.
I agree with Adam too, because like I feel sort of the same way because I never understood that whole thing of, well, why did they change? Why couldn't they just throw up the entire comic book on the screen, panel by panel, beat for beat, exactly the way it is? It's like, well, I'm sorry, but if you've seen any of the Marvel movies throughout the past dozen years, you know that's not the way that they do it. And you know that, like, for example, the Civil War movie is really just the bare bones of the Civil War comic. They just cherry pick a few story elements from the Civil War comic book arc and really fleshed it out in a very different way by necessity. They didn't have the rights to a lot of those characters because they were at Fox at that time, but also it just would have felt very shoehorned in if they tried to make it more like the comic anyway. It wouldn't have worked. Some things work better in cinema and some things work better in comics, and I think that's definitely true of WandaVision as well. And I never understood that whole thing. Again, with WandaVision, they were like, well, they gotta bring back they gotta have Mephisto be in this episode. They gotta have it tie in, you know, where like that's the thing. You know, Ray, you were saying about Evan Peters not being Pietro from the X-Men universe. I never once, and this is no disrespect or anything, but I never once thought that he was supposed to be Pietro from the X-Men universe because you know that what Kevin Feige and the rest of the team of Marvel is going to do is just recast the X-Men. They're going to bring in a whole new world of X-Men and a whole new type of mutant and everything, and they're going to, you know, they're not going to hive over everything from Fox. So this is sort of like a knowing wink, them bringing in Evan Peters, but also, like, yes, we get it. We get that on one level he was Quicksilver in the Fox universe, and so that's like a wink there. But I think that if they were setting him up as, yes, and he's continuing to be Pietro in this universe, that would have been so confusing on so many levels. And then, of course, if you didn't watch the Fox movies, you'd be like, what's going on exactly? You'd be very confused by that. You know?
Well, I think Marvel's greatest blessing is also its biggest curse, is that they have rabid, passionate fans, and that brings them to their projects over and over and makes people love the MCU.
Do you mean Marvel as a movie company or Marvel the comic company?
Both.
But both.
Yeah.
You know, it's they have the rabid fans who love these characters and in some cases grew up with these characters. And when you have people that have that deal of love for something, they're gonna analyze every single bit of it. So with the mass audience that you get that shows up on the day that Captain America comes out, you're also gonna have people pick apart every little part of his uniform and why did his collar bend this way and not that way. So you take the good with the bad, you take the passion, and then sometimes you take the overthinking and and overanalyze it.
I think their challenge, right? The genre has certain formal elements that you can't not have, so that that at some point there's going to be a big superhero battle in the skies above wherever, and we got that, and actually that it was well done, but I thought that was sort of the least interesting. But so I think the challenge with all the after 20 years of Marvel movies, and then the whole that DC Arrowverse and their DC movie universe, how do you get to what's the journey to that big battle over the streets of New York or over the Midwest, the deserts of the Midwest, and I thought what they did with WandaVision was just a brilliant way to get there, even though not even just for the hardcore fans, just for the demands of the genre, that one way or another there had to be a confrontation between somebody. I thought what they did with the two visions was ingenious. The way they diffused that battle.
That was fantastic. That to have a battle end in this philosophical discussion and then just have them kind of fly off. And also I just thought it was funny. It kind of reminded me of a scene from the end of Scott Pilgrim Conquers the World. The two evil versions just kind of agree to just have a conversation. That was brilliant. That was fantastic.
And it also reminds me of what I don't like about the bad way of doing that kind of a scene, which is that ordinarily smart characters doing stupid things and forgetting that they're smart and just acting like idiots and beating the crap out of each other.
Well, sometimes you have a deadline, Ari. You know that.
Yes, we've all been it's due yesterday, and I don't know. I think this works. Send. Yeah. But yes, we've all been there on the unforgiving deadline. But no, I like the fact that both visions were so much in character, and that the red face vision, I don't know, the color vision, I guess, was knew that the way to. I think one of them is actually called in the credits Vision, and the other one's called The Vision.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we'll call the color one Vision. So Vision knew that the way to reach out to The Vision was to appeal to his intellect and do the whole Ship of Theseus parable and everything. And I thought that worked so well. And also it's like, if you're a big history nerd, you're like, yes, this is I get this reference. But also it's so in character, and it's so much more satisfying than them beating the crap out of each other. That being said, and I think that whole scene took place in a library, didn't it? Or a bookstore?
Library. Yeah, the town library.
Right. But what's funny about it, too, is that I was also thinking as we go, I really, just in general, really enjoyed WandaVision, but I thought, going into episode 9, I'm like, if we don't get a witch-on-witch battle, I'm going to be really pissed off. Because we better get, sort of like a sword in the stone, like in the wizard battle in the animated Disney Sword in the Stone from the 50s, if anyone's seen that movie. Like the equivalent of that in live action between Wanda and Agatha, and of course that's exactly what we get. But I think the reason that it works is because the writers have laid the groundwork until that point, and there's so much, we get the fact by that point that the show is about grief, and that it's about tragedy, and it's about the kind of trying to grapple with and unpack the terrible and process the terrible things that have happened to you in your life. And so, of course, it's this great catharsis when they do have this big battle. So I think
there's such poetry that the writers brought to the characters, like the lines that the Vision was saying of the grief is love persevering, and in the last episode I was a voice with no body. It's like it's that's poetry. That's amazing. Like as a fan, as a comic book fan, I'm just excited. I'm seeing the vision brought to life. But now it's like it's pleasing me on this whole other level. That's just fantastic.
Go
sorry.
ahead, Fred. No, go ahead, please.
I think the best thing about the synthesis of the television versus comic thing, in terms of how it turned out, at least to my taste, was that battles that could easily be rendered as melodrama, where it's good versus evil, are made internal, are representations of internal battles that you see actually, represented by different bodies or different ways of looking at things. But giving, all the depth that Arie was just talking about that you see in the final episode, actually the last two episodes, is to my mind is actually paid for. You could feel people, as somebody said earlier, in the first three episodes getting, well, okay, this is interesting, but when's it going to start getting into something that has a direction that I can understand? I think what they succeeded in doing was actually bringing this whole internal thing into a comic book size. I mean, it winds up huge Marvel comic book size, gigantic, but you don't leave behind the internal aspects of it. That's what I thought they did successfully.
Also,
which was good about it. That was the best thing about it to me.
The details were also interesting in that the aspect ratio kept changing. You'd go from TV 4:3 to this widescreen Marvel to just 16:9. I mean, we were all over the place, and those were clues as to where we were in the storyline. I think the attention to detail creatively was just astonishing. And if you go through a lot of all over the internet, there's all sorts of things about the symbolism, about the colors, the hexagon. I thought that was a brilliant translation of Wanda's hex from the comic books, which was about she's doing a magic hex, and then there's hexagons all over the place. The show intros, and the fact that it was a hexagon around the town, and every shape had to do with this hexagon, and all of Wanda's magic was red or scarlet, and all of Agatha's was purple, which I don't know what the purple symbolized, but you knew it was different than Wanda's.
It helps you keep track of who's firing laser blasts at who.
Well, also,
can I go deep 50s movie nerd here for a minute?
Yeah, please do.
Am I the only one who was reminded of the battle and the showdown in Johnny Guitar between Mercedes McCambridge and Joan Crawford?
I hadn't thought of it, but now
you are going deep. You are going deep, Danny. Impressive.
I just sort of the way they were like speechifying at each other kind of reminded me of the way Nick Ray staged that in Johnny Guitar.
Well, there's clearly a lot of detail that went into it, as Fred was saying, not just in terms of the wonderful craft service, but in terms of what they did to achieve the level at a production value. And I know that they consulted with Dick Van Dyke himself, for doing the sitcom stuff, and apparently he sat with them for quite some time. I don't know if I have any more to add on this or not, Fred, but
go
ahead.
Part of the preparation for we that were in the early episodes was to look at a bunch of the source material directly, kind of analyze it, because what's interesting about it, if you look at it, is even though it's played with some of the tropes that are familiar in early sitcoms that we think of as being kind of stagey, the performances in the better shows, particularly like Dick Van Dyke, Andy Griffith, the performances are actually quite realistic and quite moving often. Yeah. So that was something we were wondering if we could do, to have it, to have them observe the conventions, but also to not be so stagey or not to be so corny that they to keep some reality to them, so that the tension was there for the audience. And he was he was very gracious and spent a lot of time and talked about it. And what he explained was, in short, that even though the situations were sometimes contrived, they really did try and be as realistic as they could in their reactions to things. And as actors, took that part of the responsibility above all else, above being funny or anything else. So, so we tried. I think, with there was some limitations to our success in that, but I think that's what we were kind of trying to do.
Were they able to get to Carl Reiner before he passed away?
I was just going
I don't know.
I'm thinking about how much time did you spend, Fred, watching Richard Deacon?
Richard Deacon,
Yeah.
I is so much in my mind. I didn't have to spend too much time. I've seen him so many times, and when I look in the mirror, here's the way life is. For all of you young people, I'm going to give you some bad news.
All of you young people, look at us. Look at us here. This is like
bad news for the young
Altacockers
folks.
on parade. Yeah, go ahead.
The bad news is you think you're going along okay in life. Things are going pretty good. One day you look in the mirror and there's this old fucking rabbi looking back at you. It just happens. There's unfortunately not much you can do. Well, not everybody gets a rabbi. You get some. So the Richard Deacon thing was very obvious. But Richard Deacon was not really their boss. He was kind of an intermediary.
Yeah.
But he also had that kind of deadpan-y style, and I had to be a little more kind of demanding than Richard Deacon was of them on the show. But the reference was very clear, very obvious to me and to everybody else, I think. Yeah. I didn't try and do his shtick at all.
We have a question from David Ringwood in our audience. David, thanks for watching. David asks Fred, even though it was taped in front of a live audience, did they enhance it with a laugh track? And he's referring especially to when people said, "Aw," when there was something cute going on.
I think there must have been some level of enhancement, although the audience did respond. But I listening to it back, I think they did. They did goose it a little bit, but that's so. When you watch golf and television, all the bird whistles are added, so that's nothing new. It's done all over the place.
A little sweetening going on. I would love to take a couple of moments. We have about 10 minutes left, by the way. If anybody watching has any more questions, we are certainly willing to take them and answer them if we can. I want to talk about some of the characters, and you can take any part you want in this. I want to talk about Agatha a little bit, who clearly was the standout, breakaway, unexpected character in this. And Agatha Harkness in the comic books was probably the last great Kirby character created before Kirby went over to DC way back in the day. So let's talk a little bit about Agatha Harkness, who is clearly a I don't know, what do you call her, an iconic character in terms of the show. Anybody?
Okay, well, I just right off the bat, what's interesting is that there was one of the first internet rumors about Agnes is that she's Agatha Harkness. But what I thought is interesting is that, there's certainly some clues, like the brooch that she wore and everything. That was the same brooch that Agatha had. But what's interesting is it's Marvel doing what they've done many, many times before, which is sort of updating the look of the character, where you kind of can't get away with a character that looks like that anymore, because the way she looks is such a stereotypical old school way of depicting that kind of character. Sort of like how in Spider-Man Homecoming, you can't depict the Vulture as looking like this doddering old man with like raisin face of wrinkles, and you can't depict the Thinker as, is it the Thinker? The guy who's like the tech guy for the Vulture? I can't, maybe I'm getting the name.
Tinkerer. We have the expert here with us.
What?
We have the expert here with us.
We do.
Danny.
Yes, thank you. The Tinker
in Brooklyn, they call him the Tinker. Yeah.
You can't have the Tinker look like that either, because it's just a very stereotypical look for the character, the way that they originally looked. And that's nothing against the way Steve Ditko drew characters. It was just a different era of drawing comics.
Right.
And so I think that goes in. The same can be applied to Agatha Harkness here, where you can't have her being this sort of like very stereotypical looking old woman witch, and of course that's also tipping your hand because it would be really obvious that's who she is.
Right.
But I think that you have to kind of reimagine her visually and make her look a little bit different.
I thought it was great how she was.
Called back to her costume, the costume was kind of accurate to the clothing she wore, but yeah, it was an updated look, and I think you're right, like how Marvel takes these what could potentially be a little goofy and presents them in a way, but still gives a nod to the fans, like everything they did with Arnim Zola to kind of give us like little hints of, oh yeah, that's what that guy looked like, but this is what we're giving you.
Well, it's also to speak to what Ari was saying earlier about how you have, there's things that work in movies, there are things that work in the comic page. I like the way Marvel reframes characters in the world that the story is currently living in. So you have, the way they kind of reimagine the Mandarin when you're dealing with a lead character who's an arms dealer and has been held captive by terrorists, and suddenly, in the internet age, and now suddenly he's a despite the fact that he ended up being an actor, but he was still presented like, someone putting out stuff on the internet and beheading people. And now you have Agatha reinvented in the sitcom world as the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, wise cracking, neighbor. So I thought it was, what I'm most impressed by is that they are not slavish to the source material. But in TV, you call it taking the spirit of the note, and they're recreating the spirit of the character and the function of the character, but they're not so beholden that they're trying to cram it into a space that no longer works for it.
That makes sense.
David, I'm sorry, I do have to run, but if you're really ending at 10, I'm going over to this other thing at 10 for Will Eisner Week, which this is with Michael Dooley. To get in late, I have a feeling we're going to be talking for a couple of hours. Thank you so much. It was what a pleasure to be with everybody.
Danny, thank you for coming.
Good seeing you, Danny.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for your time coming in.
Oh, thanks for the invite. Great to meet you guys.
And we're going to be wrapping up in a little bit also, but thanks to Danny, and I'm going to be thanking everybody in a few seconds. Before we go, I would love to just get your predictions and your feelings at the end of the show, including Fred, because I'm sure you did you watch the whole thing? You know what's going on now at this point?
Yeah, you mean at the ending, yes.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about it, because there are characters that were sort of left hanging. Their storylines were wrapped up, but we know. So let's talk about, we were just talking about Agatha. Let's talk for a moment about Agatha and how she ended up at the end of the show, because that was almost frightening and horrifying. Anybody? Where is she now?
Such a Twilight Zone episode kind of fate for that character. Yeah, it's so creepy. I hope they bring her back. I hope they bring her back in a kind of Loki sort of capacity, where she's like, I hope they bring her back actually as like a mentor to Wanda at some point in the future.
She was a good guy in the comic book. I mean, she wasn't she wasn't evil.
Yeah, and she was sort of a mentor figure to Wanda quite a bit in the comics too. And so I hope they do that, just because I think it's the easier choice to make her more of a villain, and we've already seen that here in WandaVision as well. And also, is she that villainous? I mean, maybe she's right in that the Scarlet Witch is kind of all this chaos magic that's just very dangerous. And
in the comic book, she ended up being extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? What do you guys think about where the Vision's story ended up? Ray, you got any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I was a little disappointed at how White Vision just disappeared. I mean, story-wise, it's kind of good that he's not around, so it gives Color Vision the emotional ending that we all wanted to see that it delivered. But it was kind of nagging me, like, well, if the White Vision has the memories now, how come he doesn't want to come back and now reconnect with Wanda? Does Wanda know that White Vision now has all the memories back?
But I'm wondering if he has the emotions.
Yeah.
I think
And
they're playing. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think they're playing the long game there, possibly, without, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think that Ray, that maybe, like, we'll see a payoff of that in the next couple of years in either another TV project or probably in one of the movies where they do reconnect, where Wanda and the White Vision do reconnect in some way, and I think they're sort of doing what Star Trek Nemesis was trying to do, not very successfully, with like the B4 character who was sort of Data and sort of not Data, and then at the end you get a hint that he's got a little bit of Data's personality and that Data might be coming back and through that character. But even though the actual Data had died, but they never got to follow up on that because that was the last Next Generation movie. But here I think they're kind of doing it in a better way and setting it up in a more interesting way. And I think that we are.
I think you're absolutely right because I'm this impatient person who throughout the MCU was angry at the Avengers movie for never saying Avengers Assemble. Like, oh wow, he should. Why did he say it then? How come they cut him off saying it? I was so angry. And then to wait until Endgame for them to finally say Avengers Assemble. I'm like, I'm sorry, I apologize. And
that is inside.
I'm still upset that Robert.
MCU. They know what they're doing.
I'm still upset that Robert Downey Jr. never looked at Benedict Cumberbatch and said, "No shit, Sherlock."
Yes.
That's
Well, I think Marvel has a big challenge on their hands, and I think they have the and they've earned our trust, so I'm sure they will figure it out. But they have a potential. Before we went live, Fred, you mentioned about Marvel and about their characters being grounded, and I think and that's always what drew me to Marvel. And they started the Marvel universe like the comics did, very, very grounded. It's a man that built an iron suit. It's you believe that it could exist in our world. And then they expanded to outer space, and then they expanded to magic. And one of the things that personally always turned me off about DC was their characters were just so all powerful and so all knowing, Superman particularly, that any kind of credible threat had to be so over the top that it just was, I know it sounds weird stretching credibility in a comic book, but it was so monstrous. And now between Doctor Strange and then Captain Marvel and now Scarlet Witch, being more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme, that's why I'm very curious to see like the Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I'm looking forward to some of those smaller stories as well, because now you have you have these three humongous powerful, in the comics, Scarlet Witch puts the entire, not just a town, puts the, she eradicates the thought of mutants from the entire Earth's, memory. So Marvel has a very difficult job ahead of them, because they could get too big for their own britches, and then what kind of storytelling do you have after that?
I think
one thing I can tell you, I did sign a very lengthy NDA. I can't say certain things, but one thing I can tell you for sure is that they look way ahead. Yeah. They plan things like the subway system. They're miles and miles ahead in all different storylines. I just want to tell you one briefly, if I may, a Robert Downey Jr. story. Robert Downey Jr. went to a camp, a theatrical camp called Stage Door Manor, which I was a counselor at. This is way back in the 80s, early 80s, and I was his counselor. And the very first feature film that he ever did was a film called The Pickup Artist. And I also happened to be in that movie with him. So I had been his counselor, and then, 20 years, not 20 years, but maybe 10 years later, we did this movie together called The Pickup Artist. And this was his first movie, and he had just been fired from Saturday Night Live. People don't remember he was on Saturday Night Live, but he was briefly. Anyway, we were doing this movie together, and he was super nervous, really, really nervous. And we were doing a scene together. At the end of the scene, I told him, I said, you're really great. I think you're going to be a huge star. And he said, you really think that? Honestly? I said, I don't say that to a lot of people, but I really have this feeling you're going to be a gigantic star. I just think you have this quality. And we talked about it and laughed about it. And every Christmas, I send him a card saying, hang in there, Robert. I know it's going to happen for you.
That's awesome.
On that note, any final thoughts before we go? Because we've been here over an hour, and I thank all of you for your generosity to spend the time talking with us. And I hope you can all come back so we can talk about other stuff. And before we sign off, Fred, what are you working on other than trying to get a COVID shot? And what's going on with you?
Well, I have a couple of films that will be in theaters pretty soon. One of them, I can never remember things I mean because I did them a year and a half ago before COVID
Just
happened.
refer to it as the Trisket movie.
Right. One of them is a Trisket movie, which is called Shiva Baby, which will be on either a major streamer or cable, I think probably by this summer. The other is a called Together, both of which I recommend to you highly. And later on this year, if all goes as planned, I will be doing my fourth collaboration with S. Craig Zoller, very interesting writer-director called S. Craig Zoller, collaborating with him and Vince Vaughn for the fourth time.
And
Interesting movie.
And you didn't even bother. You didn't even bother mentioning viral vignettes because
I'll let me leave that to you, the creator.
No. You. I get. Yeah.
So my old friend David Levin called me up maybe, I don't know, 3-4 months ago. Was it 5 months ago?
It was a year ago.
Is it that long ago?
We started right at the beginning of the pandemic. Yeah.
So David and I know each other. I used to be one of the major voices at USA Network, and he was a producer there. So we worked together, knew each other from that. And he said, "Listen, nobody's working during the pandemic. I have this idea. If we're doing a show, and I've written but I have some scripts that are written, and maybe you'd be interested in doing it." So I read about them, and they were great. Where are they still available? On YouTube?
They're on YouTube. I am thinking of doing like running them all together and doing like a live feed with us commenting in between, but we can talk about that offline.
Anyway, they're called Viral Vignettes, and I do one with that's me and Jane Kaczmarek.
I love that one.
Me too. And the other one is me and Barry Bostwick. I don't remember the titles, to tell you the truth.
The Barry Bostwick one it was a long time ago.
Promo,
but
no titles.
No titles. Yeah, but they were really funny. And my favorite was where you're playing Jane's ex-husband and you're having Zoom sex.
Yes,
as I recall. And
I keep trying to get her to rehearse with me again, but she won't return my call. I don't know.
Well, you could watch it over and over again.
You think I haven't?
Jane is very, very sexy in it, and Fred, of course, has the voice of God, he's very sexy in it too.
I agree. Well, Jane and I know each other for 40-something years. We went to drama school together, and she's a lovely, lovely person who I love for many years. Anyway.
Ray, you want to sort of put in a pitch for what you're doing right now? You got nothing.
Nothing at the moment. I had been busy during COVID working on Our Cartoon President on Showtime.
Yep.
And I was working on Bless the Hearts for Fox. And actually, Our Cartoon President might come back. There's a lot of humor that can be milled from the Biden administration as well as the Trump administration. So
hoping you didn't mean he'd have to be reelected for the show to come back.
I was wondering if that's what he meant too. Yeah, I was like, what?
Oh God, please. Let's not get political. We're being pop culture-ish here. I try not to get political at all on this show.
It's a cartoon president. So if that comes back, hopefully I'll get a chance to work on that again. And then other than that, missing Mad Magazine and just looking for illustration work where it comes my way.
Yeah, we all miss Mad Magazine. Adam Freeman, what are you up to? I know you're doing some stand-up and you're doing some other stuff. Why don't you tell us what you're working on?
Yeah, what I can. I mean, hopefully the clubs will open up soon, and you can come see me at the Comedy Store or any of the LA clubs or New York clubs. Have a comic book coming out that's not announced yet, unfortunately, so I can't say the name of it. Lots in common with the with the Marvel Universe. My unscripted show, Mama June, from Not the Hot, returns in a week or so. And then, just finishing up the pilots for the season and making TV. So it's all good.
Making TV is a good thing. And Arie Kaplan, tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, I wrote the screenplay, so that, like the story and dialogue for a video game called EQ, Next Generation Lodestar, and it's an emotional fitness game. It's a game that teaches people. It's a video game that teaches people how to lower their anxiety and heighten their emotional resilience. And I think it's a very timely game for this pandemic that we're all in. And it's a game that came out. The first version came out, I think, 3 years ago, in 2018, I believe, and this is a complete relaunch of it. New version of the game with a new story and new stories and new dialogue, and you're a time-traveling hero called a Lodestar, and you bounce around from to different time periods and have different adventures with people from various historical eras. And the first story, the House of Chrondolar, which is a parody of Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings and various other fantasy epics. That's live now on EQ from Psycaps. It's available at the app stores. And I also wrote a children's graphic novel called Frankie and the Dragon.
Oh, he has it with him. Hold it up. Hold it still.
I have it with me.
Nice.
Yeah. It's a very personal book for me because the main character is based on my daughter. And so I had a lot of fun writing that. And it's one of 3 mythical creatures books I wrote for Capstone that are all out right now. The others are The Troll Under Puzzlefoot Bridge and Trevor the Very Best Giant. And also, last but very not least, I wrote the Loki Little Golden Book, which recently came out from Penguin Random House. Nice. And I think I can get it. There it is. And it's a lot of fun writing that. And that's
cool.
it.
Very cool. And as for me, I don't know what I got. I got this. I got Pop Goes the Culture. We're coming out with new episodes all the time. We're going to start doing a lot more of these live shows. Hopefully we can get all you guys back for this because I had a great time. I hope you did too. I love the insider stories, and we will probably do more of those. Our audience loves it. By the way, Fred, I'm told that the 2 titles were Jackson Inferno, which is really hilarious. That's the one with you and Barry Bostwick. And the other one is Phoning It In. And that was the one with Jane Kaczmarek. I urge you to look for it. It is on our Pop Goes the Culture TV channel here on YouTube. And any money that comes from advertising revenue on that goes to the Actors Fund. And we had some really good actors working on that. We had, in addition to Fred and Barry and Jane, we also had John Schneider and Maxwell Gale, and we had other friends of mine, Don Most, Gail O'Grady came on, Lydia Cornell came on, Renee Taylor, Michelle Green. It was just an amazing group of actors, most of whom I grew up with. Mary Chieffo, who was on Star Trek Discovery. It was just great. I hope we can do some more of them, but that was the beginning of the pandemic, and nobody knew what was going to happen. And singers were doing concerts from their living room, and stand-up comedians were doing stand-up from their bathroom, and people were doing talk shows from their bedroom. But actors, as Fred will tell you, need to act. They need scripts. They need to be doing, it's not just a living. It's a need, and writers need to write. And it was a really fun, cool thing that we were able to do to raise some money and have some fun. And just at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were all sort of insulated and didn't know what was going to happen, I think it cheered a bunch of people up, not the least of which was me. And it's something we can all do. We're all sort of still in for a couple more months before I'm optimistic that that things are going to clear up a little bit. But hopefully we can have some fun doing this. So thanks, everybody, for doing this. Next time we'll talk about something else. So I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for coming by. Fred and Adam and Ari and Ray. And, of course, thanks to Steve and Danny, who had to leave because this is live and people have lives. So I'll let you get back to your lives. And thanks, everybody, again.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Had a great time.
Excelsior.
Excelsior, yes. Next time we'll
Ray,
talk
I have a
about
question for you. I don't know if we're still on or not.
We are still on.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
I can ask this publicly. Do you know Brian Postman?
I
That's
don't know
really
Brian
familiar.
Postman.
He's a comic artist. He also he went to SVA. He also studied with Will Eisner. He's a dear friend of mine. I thought maybe you might know him. He drew Spider-Woman and some other stuff.
Oh,
For
cool.
Marvel.
That is very cool.
Very cool.
I have to look him up. Anybody?
I don't. That name
The
sounds.
name sounds familiar, but I don't know.
The
Yeah.
name is very familiar. I don't know if I know him personally, but I'm pretty sure I know his work.
Yeah, Brian Postman. Great guy. Anyway, just
Very
curious.
All right, guys. Thank you
All right.
so much.
Good seeing
and,
all of you.
We will see you soon.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Nice to meet everybody.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Great.
Yeah, nice meeting you guys.